Britain in the 1980s was restless, ambitious, and deeply unsure of itself all at once. Factories were shutting, new money was arriving, and the high street looked nothing like it had a decade before. But through all of that noise and uncertainty, something quietly extraordinary was happening on Britain's roads. Ordinary people, teachers, nurses, factory workers, young couples, were buying cars in numbers that had never been seen before, and the cars they chose came from places that would have seemed unthinkable just a generation earlier. Italy, France, Germany, Japan, the world had arrived on British driveways, and Britain had opened the door. Today we are counting down the 10 best-selling cars of 1980s Britain. Some names will bring back genuine memories. Others might genuinely surprise you. But the number one, the car that owned Britain's roads throughout the entire decade, has a story unlike anything else on this list. Let's begin our countdown with number 10. Number 10, Fiat Uno. Italy sent Britain a small car in 1983, and Britain said yes without hesitation. The Fiat Uno arrived looking sharp, modern, and unlike anything on the domestic market at the time. Its tall, boxy body was cleverly designed to maximize interior space while keeping the overall footprint remarkably small, perfect for Britain's increasingly congested town centers. The 1.0 and 1.1-liter engines were economical enough to make weekly running costs almost painless, and the price sat comfortably within reach of younger buyers and urban commuters on modest wages. Do you remember seeing these in cheerful colors parked on narrow city streets? The Uno did something important. It proved that a small car could feel genuinely well thought out rather than merely cheap. Italy had understood something about modern urban life that others were still working out. Number 9, Renault 5. France had been quietly charming British buyers since the Renault 5 first appeared in the early 70s, and by the 1980s that charm had matured into something close to genuine loyalty. The Renault 5 had a personality that was almost impossible to dislike. It was small without feeling cramped, economical without feeling punishing, and styled with just enough French flair to make it stand out on otherwise unremarkable suburban streets. Women drivers particularly embraced it as a confident, independent choice at a time when the car market still tilted heavily toward male preferences. And this is where things get interesting. Renault launched the turbocharged 5 GT Turbo later in the decade, transforming the little Frenchman into something genuinely wild. But even the ordinary versions were selling in remarkable numbers long before that. France had a gift for making practical feel desirable. Number 8, Peugeot 205. When the Peugeot 205 reached British showrooms in 1983, something in the super mini market shifted permanently and quite dramatically. Here was a small French car that did not feel like a budget choice, it felt like a considered, confident one. The styling was genuinely beautiful for its class, the interior quality was noticeably superior to rivals at the same price, and the driving experience, even in the modest 1.0-liter version, felt pleasingly alert and responsive. But the GTI variant, launched with a 1.6-liter engine and real sporting intent, became something of a cultural phenomenon among younger British drivers. Would you have picked one over its competitors back then? Many did, enthusiastically and repeatedly. The 205 permanently raised expectations of what a small car owed its driver. No manufacturer could ignore what Peugeot had done here. Number 7, Volkswagen Golf. Germany arrived in this conversation with the kind of quiet confidence that needs no announcement. The Volkswagen Golf had been on British roads since the mid-70s, but through the 1980s it built a reputation that went far beyond simple sales numbers. Buying a Golf meant something. It meant you valued precision over flash, quality over clever marketing, and longevity over short-term appeal. The 1.3 and 1.6-liter petrol engines were refined and economical, and the GTI had already created an entirely new category of performance car that every rival was urgently scrambling to replicate. Professional buyers trusted it completely. Younger drivers aspired to it. The Golf never chased trends because it was too busy setting them. And one car higher on this list borrowed heavily from that German philosophy of understated engineering confidence. Number 6, Nissan Micra. Japan entered British roads with the Nissan Micra in 1983, and it did so carrying a weapon that no competitor could easily match, reliability so consistent it almost felt unreasonable. While domestic and European rivals were still struggling with reputations built on electrical faults, rust, and unpredictable build quality, the Micra simply worked. Day after day, week after week, without drama or disappointment. Its 1.0-liter engine was modest but efficient, and the clever interior packaging made the compact body feel surprisingly generous inside. Pensioners loved it. Young commuters trusted it. Urban drivers valued its tight turning circle on Britain's increasingly congested streets. Few people realize just how completely the Micra changed buyer expectations in this segment. Japan was not just competing in 1980s Britain. Japan was, very quietly, beginning to win. Number 5. Toyota Corolla. If Nissan brought reliability, Toyota brought it wrapped in an extra layer of refinement that British buyers found almost impossible to resist. The Toyota Corolla through the 1980s was not exciting in any dramatic sense, and that was precisely the point. It offered a level of fit, finish, and mechanical dependability that made the ownership experience genuinely stress-free in a way that still felt novel at the time. Families chose it for the estate version's practicality. Professionals chose the saloon for its composed, quiet motorway manners. Running costs were low, depreciation was manageable, and the engines, ranging from 1.3 to 1.6 liters, never drew attention to themselves by misbehaving. And this is where things get interesting. The Corolla's success in Britain sent a message to every domestic manufacturer that comfort and reliability together were an unbeatable combination. Number 4. Austin Rover Metro. The Metro was not merely a car. It was a statement of national intent. Unveiled at the Birmingham Motor Show in October 1980, it was presented quite deliberately as Britain's answer to the foreign superminis that had been steadily eroding domestic sales throughout the late 70s. Built at Longbridge in Birmingham, it carried emotional and political weight from its very first day. The 1.0 and 1.3-litre engines delivered solid fuel economy, the size suited Britain's crowded roads perfectly, and the price brought genuine new car ownership within reach of buyers who had never previously considered it. Even Margaret Thatcher stood beside one at launch. Despite well-documented reliability concerns that followed the brand throughout the decade, Britain bought the Metro in enormous numbers anyway. Sometimes loyalty runs deeper than logic, and in 1980s Britain, that was very much the case. Number 3. Vauxhall Cavalier. The Vauxhall Cavalier owned the British company car market throughout the 1980s with an authority that its rivals found deeply frustrating. While other manufacturers competed on headline performance or styling drama, Vauxhall understood something more fundamental about what fleet buyers and business drivers actually needed: comfort, reliability, reasonable running costs, and enough style to feel respectable without being ostentatious. The Mark II and Mark III Cavaliers delivered all of it convincingly. Regional managers drove them. Sales representatives clocked enormous mileages in them without complaint. Middle management Britain essentially lived in them during the working week. The range of trim levels meant buyers could position themselves precisely. A 1.6 gallon said something subtly different from a 2.0 CDI, and Vauxhall understood exactly what it said. In status-conscious 80s Britain, that kind of social precision mattered enormously. Number 2. Honda Civic. Japan's second entry on this list tells a story that is both surprising and entirely logical once you understand it. The Honda Civic had been building a following in Britain through the late 70s, and by the 1980s that following had grown into something substantial and deeply loyal. Honda brought engineering innovation that felt genuinely ahead of its time. The CVCC engine technology improved fuel efficiency without sacrificing performance, and the build quality was exceptional at every price point. Younger professional buyers, in particular, gravitated toward the Civic as a smarter, more forward-thinking alternative to the European mainstream. It felt like a car designed by people who had thought about everything. And few people realize that the Civic's consistent British sales success pushed every other manufacturer to take Japanese competition far more seriously than they had previously been willing to admit. Number 1. Ford Escort. The Ford Escort. Through most of the 1980s, no other car came close to matching what this one achieved on British roads. What made it extraordinary was not a single outstanding quality but something far harder to manufacture: complete, honest versatility. The Escort came as a hatchback, a saloon, and a practical estate, meaning it genuinely fitted almost every version of British family life without compromise. Basic 1.1 engine suited cautious first-time buyers. The 1.6 estate carried growing families with quiet dignity. The XR3i brought genuine performance credibility and made the Escort cool in a way that surprised everyone who had written it off as ordinary. Britain did not just buy the Escort because it was good. Britain bought it because it felt completely and utterly right, for almost everyone, almost all of the time. That is an achievement no other car of the decade matched. And there you have it, 10 cars, 10 completely different stories, and one decade that changed British motoring permanently. What this list truly reveals is the remarkable range of Britain's automotive appetite in the 1980s. Italian style, French personality, German precision, Japanese reliability, and good old British resilience, all of it found a home on the nation's driveways simultaneously. These cars were not simply methods of getting from one place to another. They were part of how people understood themselves, what they could afford, what they aspired to, what they valued. The 1980s were complicated and sometimes painful years for Britain, but on the roads it was a genuinely exciting time, full of choice and change and competition. Which of these cars brings back the strongest memory for you? Did your family own one? Tell us in the comments, we read every single response. And if this brought back something good, a like really does help us reach more people. Thank you for watching. Until next time.